mid-90s, hip-hop was coming to the forefront of mainstream media. Tupac was selling multi-platinum albums. He was a movie star.
It felt like he had napalm burning inside of him, that kind of intensity.
The thugging is gonna make me $1 million because it just got me platinum. And that's what I got to do.
With Biggie's career on the rise, Tupac took Biggie under his wing as a successful rapper.
Big and Pac was best friends.
They were two peas in a pot, always very competitive.
No one knew this friendship could go horribly wrong.
When I heard that Tupac got shot at Quad Studio, I was really concerned. Tupac felt that Big had played a role in what happened to him.
And that really severed their relationship.
Big and Pac beef was serious. It was for real.
By early 96, the beef is totally out of control.
Either you were Team Tupac or you were Team Biggie.
It became dangerous immediately.
While stopping at this intersection, a car with 4 people pulled up and opened fire on Shakur and Knight.
All of hip-hop was like, oh my God.
Doctors say he will survive his second shooting in 2 years.
I said, do you know who did this to you?
After the shooting, a lot of people pointed the finger at Biggie and Tupac's personal beef.
These mafia dons? Like, no, these are record business people.
Cars are on a collision course, and you can jump in between them and wave your hands all you like. But those cars were going to crash.
September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas, Nevada. Hip-hop star Tupac Shakur and Death Row Records label owner Suge Knight are on their way to a club. They never make it there.
Tupac got shot in a drive-by shooting, and it was all over the news. My name is Brennan Williams, and I'm a music journalist.
While stopping at this intersection, a car with 4 people pulled up and opened fire on Shakur and Knight. Tupac, along with Knight, were rushed to the hospital.
Tupac was rushed into the trauma unit at the University Medical Center in Vegas. He was in critical condition, and he was put on life support.
13 shots were fired into the car. I'm Kathy Scott, and I'm a crime author. I was a reporter for the Las Vegas Sun. 3 bullets hit Tupac. 1 went through his abdomen and down into his pelvic area. Another hit his hand, shot off his ring, and the other went into his chest. 1 in the chest was the biggest worry.
He is severely injured internally. He has multiple gunshot wounds to the chest.
When Pac went to the hospital, all of hip-hop was like, oh my God. I'm Torre, and I'm a writer. It didn't make any sense. Pac was special and he could not be killed. Nobody knew what was going to happen.
The entire hip-hop community, they were in a state of shock because Tupac at the time of the shooting was like one of the biggest hip-hop artists. In the mid-90s, hip-hop was coming to the forefront of mainstream media, from record sales to its artists, and Tupac was definitely encompassed in all of that. He was selling multi-platinum albums, he was a movie star, and he was at the top of his game.
How could a hip-hop megastar fall victim to such a violent crime?
I'm partying, and one of the homies come running in the door and said, Pac and Suge were shot on the strip. My name is Danny Boy. I am a friend of Tupac Shakur. I got to the hospital, it was thousands of people outside with Tupac posters, candles. I mean, anything you could think of. And it was lined up along the street. As far as you could see, grown men were out there crying. And I immediately lost it.
I went to the hospital. Word had spread rather quickly. Cars were driving around the parking lot, blaring Tupac's music, hoping he was going to be okay. The lobby of the trauma center is like a waiting room for family and friends. Afeni Shakur, his mother, was the one in charge of allowing people to go in.
While loved ones rush to be by Tupac's side, they are getting disturbing information on exactly how the police approached the crime scene earlier that night.
When Pac got shot, car came up beside them and opened fire. And I heard that Suge then made a U-turn to head back to the Strip.
Suge Knight is injured from bullet fragments, but keeps driving.
He ended up with 3 flat tires because he was going up and down the median. And the entourage, Tupac and Suge's entourage, followed them. And then the police, they arrived and didn't know what was going on, and they see all these people, you know, these guys in cars. And they just ordered everybody down, face down on the blacktop and put their hands over their necks. They treated them like criminals, and they were victims.
They actually were searching Pac and Suge as they were bleeding. They were searching Pac. It took them a while to even get him in an ambulance to take him to the hospital. They were treating them as if they were criminals.
Tupac's fiancée, Kidada Jones, daughter of the legendary music producer Quincy Jones, arrives at the hospital. With her is Tupac's close friend and rapper, Yo-Yo.
So I get to the hospital. We rush right in. I see his mom. My name is Yo-Yo. I am a great friend of Pac's. We go into the room, and immediately I start praying. I start praying, asking God to bless him. I'm blessing his feet. I'm blessing the top of his head. I start looking up under the covers, and his fingers cut off, shot off. I just tell him, I say, you know, everybody's praying for you.
MC Hammer showed up. So did the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Went in and Afeni allowed them into the room.
Friends and fans of the rap singer surround UMC, wishing they could share their messages with Shakur.
I'm one of his biggest fans, and I love him so very much. And I don't want Tupac to get shot. And I don't want Tupac to get shot no more.
I remember hearing what a madhouse it was at the hospital. On Wendy Day, I'm an advocate for hip-hop artists. And I was a friend of Tupac's. It was almost like people felt that if they could go there and stand outside, that their energy would heal him.
Friends, family, and fans demand to know who would want Tupac dead. The Las Vegas police quickly arrive at a theory.
Their sense was it was a drive-by shooting, which could possibly indicate gang-related. They just figured he was just this black thug.
Police find out that Tupac and Suge Knight had been coming from a Tyson fight at the MGM Grand and were headed to a club where Tupac was due to perform.
On my way to the club, I called Suge. He's like, man, Tyson done knocked this MF out. Meet us over at the club. I got in my car, went to the club.
The event was all over the radio. Everybody knew about it.
Although Tupac had several gunshot wounds, a total of 13 bullets were fired into the car, which left a big question. Was Tupac the intended target?
We all stayed there at the hospital waiting to see what was going on with Pac. And then here comes Suge walking down the hallway. In a daze almost, like lost.
Suge Knight was also hit in the attack and sustained head injuries.
I mean, you could see the hurt. Suge was hurt. And I really think he was scared for Pac's life. I think he had some sense of guilt.
Is Suge Knight simply upset at his friend getting shot? Or is there something bigger at play? A background check reveals that the driver, Suge Knight, has a rap sheet.
Suge Knight has a long history of run-ins with the law, ranging from weapons charges, assault charges, drugs, you name it.
Suge Knight was very powerful person in the Los Angeles and Compton area.
There were rumors as to how he started Death Row. There were rumors saying that he had money from gang affiliates that he was tied to, but it was never a hard, solid story, so to speak.
While police investigate further, rumors quickly begin circling in the hip-hop world, and one name rises to the surface.
As soon as somebody is shot, we think, how are they doing and who did it? And the who did it question immediately redounded for so much of media to Biggie Smalls. That was talked about a lot.
Biggie Smalls was also a hugely successful hip-hop artist and a one-time close friend of Tupac.
When Tupac was shot, there was an ongoing feud between Tupac and Biggie.
Biggie versus Tupac. There was so much that went on. I don't think people realized how far this beef would go.
You had guys from the street, massive egos, tons of money, tons of people watching.
Could a music rivalry really be responsible for a murder attempt?
It became dangerous. It became dangerous immediately.
Coming up, is it possible that a member of Tupac's own team is responsible for ordering the Las Vegas hit?
There were reports that Tupac was planning to leave the label.
This is a seriously fearsome dude. Don't mess with Suge.
And later, did an attack on Tupac years earlier set off a collision course?
Tupac felt Big had played a role in what happened to him.
That would end with murder?
These mafia dons? No, these are record business people.
September 8th, 1996. Just one day after hip-hop star Tupac Shakur has been shot on the Las Vegas Strip in a drive-by shooting.
The entire hip-hop community, they were in a state of shock because Tupac at the time of his shooting was one of the biggest hip-hop artists.
When I heard that he had been shot, I found myself reaching out to people that I knew were there, and it was just a very chaotic situation. It was just hard to get information.
The nurses, the doctors, they kept us in the loop of what was going on with him as far as his health was concerned. He was on life support.
Tupac is forced to undergo surgery if he is to have any chance of survival. Doctors tear through his Thug Life tattoo and remove his right lung, which is shattered by bullets. He's given a 50-50 chance of survival. If he survives, it's possible he will be able to identify his own shooter.
Everyone was hoping and praying that Tupac was going to pull through.
We didn't know what was going to happen if he died.
With no security footage of the shooting, police are left with only eyewitnesses to gather leads.
Police were in and out of the hospital and into homicide cops as well, trying to talk to witnesses.
But they're hit with a roadblock right away.
They couldn't get any cooperation from the witnesses, and they had nothing to go on.
It was immediately apparent that people were very reluctant to talk about what they knew or didn't know. My name is Greg Kading. I'm a retired detective from the Los Angeles Police Department. I attribute that to the street culture. It's not in your best interest to cooperate with the police. These type of investigations are somewhat stalled.
People in my community don't trust the police, so it's been us against them for a long time. There's no trust there, so we take matters sometimes in our own hands. My name is Skip Townsend. I was a blood gang member for over 27 years. It's not surprising that no one would want to tell the police what they saw.
Although he was behind the wheel of Tupac's car during the shooting, Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight isn't talking either.
Suge wouldn't cooperate with nobody, no police.
Could this record executive be hiding something about the shooting? Investigators dig deeper into Suge Knight.
Suge Knight is a former football player as well as a former bodyguard who founded Death Row Records.
Death Row Records starts in 1991, and they roar to the top of hip-hop. This is the label of Suge Knight, who came from the streets and the gang life and This is the label of Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, the label of The Chronic, which was one of the biggest albums of hip-hop history at that time.
Suge broke barriers with what he did. At that time, Death Row was the Motown of the 90s. There was nothing bigger. Everything that Suge touched turned to gold. And to see it happen, he was Superman.
Suge Knight has built a successful label, but he doesn't seem to be the typical record executive, and some interesting connections are found.
During our investigation, although we were very accustomed to gang violence and gang activity, I don't think that we recognized how the gangs had infiltrated the music industry.
Suge's family, his affiliation was the Bloods. Suge Knight is one of the ones who made it out the community. He was an athlete, a star athlete, and he made it. He decided on his own to come back, and when he made money, he incorporated his friends. He brought them in, and then he became the influence in that community.
Death Row Records employed many of the gang members from Suge's old neighborhood, primarily some Blood gang members that were friends of his from childhood. He gave them various titles.
Some of the homies was working in the promotion department, the marketing department. He put them, I think, in areas that they were interested. It wasn't nobody scared in marketing. Like, it's a real gangster in there that's in that drawing. Like, please don't make him put his brush down.
Suge started employing people. He employed his friends.
He was providing money and giving them cars. He wore colors that associated with them.
The Bloods represent themselves by wearing red.
Those are people he grew up with who didn't make it, so he's supposed to reach back.
He would use that gang reputation to further himself and his company.
It was a definite hero to not only his community, but all the community members in Compton. Suge Knight was a very powerful person.
Despite the shooting taking place on the well-populated streets of Las Vegas, police find no useful witness accounts to the incident.
The claim is no one out there saw anything. I think that somebody saw something, and they should most definitely come forth and say something.
But they did manage to identify the kind of weapon used. Tupac was shot with .40 caliber bullets, which were fired from a Glock semi-automatic pistol. Unfortunately, it's a popular gun, and the most name-dropped in hip-hop.
Police in Las Vegas say they have no motive for this shooting, but the rapper's troubled past will certainly be part of the investigation.
The strategy that we took in our investigation was to go back and start from the beginning. And we looked historically at Tupac Shakur's own personal background, both, criminal background, his associations.
Pac was born in '71 in New York. The Black Panthers still had a movement, and he had so much family in the movement. It had a huge impact on him, a sort of Black power liberation vibe. Pac's mother was really good at exposing him to all this sort of artistic stuff. In 1988, when he's 17, he and his mother move to Oakland. And now we start to see the real Pac start to emerge. He grew to become a rapper.
Early on, when Pac was 17 and 18, when he was first rapping, he had one agenda. His whole life was dedicated to making Black lives matter. My name's Layla. Tupac was a really good friend of mine. I also managed him early in his career.
Tupac Shakur is not a criminal. He's certainly not a hardened criminal. He's an artist. He was always trying to use his abilities in order to make a statement.
He spoke truth. He spoke about pain. He talked about heartache.
And he's just this sort of Pac tornado rolling through the world.
While cooperation with the police in the aftermath of Tupac's shooting is lacking, investigative journalist Kathy Scott is uncovering new information.
Well, I learned in talking to a few people that there was bad blood between rapper Biggie Smalls out of the East Coast and Tupac Shakur, who came out of the West. When Tupac was shot, then some of the people who bought into that said, see?
With further investigation, Scott becomes aware that the bad blood is not just related to the performer Biggie Smalls, but also to the record label he is signed to, Bad Boy Records.
Sean Puffy Combs founded and ran Bad Boy Records, which was based in New York.
While Tupac and Death Row Records were enjoying massive success, for the past couple of years, their dominance was being threatened by this East Coast competitor who was making gains in the hip-hop market.
It was just something about Puff Daddy's energy that I liked and his track record of where he came from, being a hip-hop dancer and a hip-hop promoter. I liked the direction that Puff was going at the time, young and hungry.
Okay, well, y'all need to pay for what y'all need. I'll go back in the studio. Y'all just pay for me to go back in the studio and tell me exactly what you want.
Puffy taps into new talent, which will launch his label into stardom.
Puffy hit me on the 1-800-SKY pages. He was like, yo, I want to set up a meeting to hear this guy, you know, Biggie Smalls. I'm DJ Mr. C, the person that discovered the notorious, glorious B.I.G., and he was my friend. We get in Puff's office, and the first thing Puff says to Big is, I want you to rhyme right now. Rhyme on the spot. And Big kicks a verse to Puff. Puff was like, I can have a record out on you by the summer. Would you be cool with that?
What Babe Ruth was to the Yankees is what Biggie becomes to Bad Boy. He is the artist who is the pillar of the place.
Tupac became a fan of artist Christopher Wallace, a.k.a. Biggie Smalls, when he first heard his music in 1993.
When Big and Pac first heard of each other, I had something to do with them meeting. I am Matty C. I was a friend of Biggie's, and I wrote the Unsigned Hype column in The Source. There was a guy named Paul Stewart. He was riding in a car with Tupac, and Tupac was in the car playing Biggie's first single for hours. Paul calls me up and he's like, yo, you're not gonna believe this. Tupac's in the car playing your man's song over and over and over. I told Big the story. He loved to hear it, of course. He loved Pac. And very soon after, I guess they bumped heads and they got real cool.
Soon, Biggie and Pac consider each other brothers.
They both were great storytellers. They both were crazy talented. So I think that attracted them. It just was an immediate connection between the two. My name is Sybil Penix. I was Biggie's stylist, and Biggie was my friend. When Big and Pac hung out, it was just like a family hanging out, just friends and family having fun. They were always funny and making jokes, and they were always rhyming.
I was around when Pac and Biggie hung out. They were two peas in a pot. Having great relations and, you know, Biggie staying over Pac's house. Very competitive, always very competitive.
Street cred was one of the factors that fans looked for in a rapper, and Biggie and Tupac definitely possessed that. They were able to tell the stories of the streets.
How could they not be friends, right? I mean, like, they're two big egos. They know the street. They know hip-hop. I mean, they didn't know anybody else like each other.
With the obvious bond between them, no one expects what their futures hold.
No one could have predicted how dangerous the situation was going to become.
The beef started out as, they had a falling out. So that was the true beef.
Coming up, could a horrific spike in violence 300 miles away be connected to Tupac's shooting?
The motivation for the shootings that occurred in Compton may be in retaliation for the events that transpired in Las Vegas.
And later, a witness breaks his 20-year silence.
After 20 years, Suge Knight broke his silence and said that he knew who shot Tupac.
It's September 1996. 3 days after being wounded in a drive-by shooting, hip-hop star Tupac Shakur remains in critical condition. Despite being top dog at the seemingly invincible Death Row Records, Tupac had somehow been hit.
I think a lot of people was kind of scared to come to the hospital. It made everybody a little nervous because a lot of us didn't think we can be touched. And right now, we've been touched in the worst way.
His friends and family stay close by his side, worried that events could escalate further.
Death threats was coming in daily. People were calling in the hospital saying, we're gonna finish what we started on Pac.
Whoever did that was probably still around, and if they thought they didn't finish it, they would have wanted to.
Tupac's loved ones don't believe the Las Vegas police are doing everything they can.
Even out of all of the death threats that he was getting, I didn't see the presence of the police. It was like we were out there on our own. It may have been a squad car outside every now and then.
When Tupac and Shakur got shot, I only recall seeing 2 law enforcement officers there that appeared to be working the case. My name is Reggie Wright, Jr. I was the head of security for Death Row Records while I was employed by the City of Compton Police Department. It was common for law enforcement to have second jobs. I was one of the first police officers that had started working with the rappers.
We was policing the hospital. We were security.
I did assign 2 officers outside of Tupac's door, mainly so he can rest and heal. He did have an experience with people trying to get into his room while he was laid up.
Insiders are not only frustrated with hospital security, but they're also unsatisfied with the investigation at large.
They treated this like, black guy killed a black guy. Well, who cares?
I offered my services to the Las Vegas police detectives and that I would be getting information and feeding it to them. But when they shrugged me off, I kind of knew that they wasn't there to try to either solve that crime or that they didn't want any cooperation from any of us.
Police claim that it's a lack of cooperation that's actually impeding their efforts.
It amazes me that when we have professional bodyguards as part of this entourage, that they can't even give us an accurate description of the vehicle.
Investigators circle back to the main witness to the crime, Suge Knight, and he finally talks. He claims he doesn't know anything. Las Vegas police are stalled in their investigation, but 300 miles away, Los Angeles police are dealing with a huge increase in shootings.
When Tupac got shot, the Bloods and the South Side Compton Crips went at a war that was just constant back and forth shooting. The worst place to be would have been on the east side of Compton at that time.
A rash of drive-by shootings leaves 3 people dead and 12 injured.
The Crips and the Bloods are 2 gangs at each other's necks for a long, long time. And the Crips identified themselves by wearing blue. The Bloods identified themselves by wearing red.
Investigators suspect the reason for the spike in violence.
Our investigation revealed that some of the motivation for the shootings that occurred in Compton may be in retaliation for the events that transpired in Las Vegas.
It appears the Bloods are seeking revenge on the Crips. Payback for Tupac's shooting.
Because of Tupac being shot, the Bloods was definitely backing Suge Knight.
Gangs do retaliate for perceived violence against gang members of a particular set.
I talked to a gang member who's good friends with Suge Knight, and I was told that Suge Knight initiated the bloodbath and the gang violence in retaliation for Tupac's shooting.
If Knight is giving retaliation orders to the Bloods, could he have evidence that the Crips are responsible for Tupac's shooting?
All this starts to bubble up and start to say, we are now enemies and let's go to war. This is a seriously fearsome dude. Don't mess with Suge.
So was Knight the intended target and Tupac simply an innocent bystander? Or was Tupac actually involved in the gang world?
It did seem as Pac went on, he absorbed more and more of that thug life and the tropes of that and the way of carrying yourself.
It felt like he had napalm burning inside of him, like that kind of intensity.
Thug life, thug life.
Everybody witnessed the change.
He's hanging out with some very serious professional gangsters and thugs, tough guys.
Tupac wasn't a gang member, but he was gang affiliated.
During our investigation, we became aware of the incident at the Quad Studios in 1994 and started to think that potentially this 94 incident could have something to do with his 96 shooting.
November 1994, New York City. Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls are both booked to record on separate projects in the same venue, Quad Studios. While Biggie, Puffy, and their entourage are in the studio, Tupac arrives.
It's been reported that he was walking in the lobby into an elevator with his friends. 3 assailants came up and shot him and robbed him.
I was in the studio with Big the night that Tupac got shot at Quad. Everybody was like, let's go down there. Went in the elevator, got down there. By the time we got down into the lobby, the police were already there and basically just lined us up. They just kind of held us in the lobby until they brought Tupac in a stretcher and took him out first.
It was very shocking and amazing that he survived the Quad shooting because he was shot twice in the head, twice in the groin, and once in the hand. So that was 5 times that he got shot, and he lived to rap about it.
For Tupac, it changed everything. He thinks it was a setup.
Tupac felt that Puffy and Big, because they were in the studio that night, had played a role in what happened to him.
Did Pac think Biggie and Puffy had something to do with it? For sure. That they knew something. I don't know if he thought that they set him up, but they knew something. His friends knew something was about to go down with him and didn't let him know. It hurt him to the core.
He felt that one of them knew, and that if they didn't know, they should have known. Tupac felt he should have been protected.
Bad Boy, Puff Daddy, Notorious B.I.G., Little C's, or anybody that was at that session upstairs had absolutely nothing to do with what happened to Tupac downstairs.
It was always very clear that Big not only had nothing to do with it, but was genuinely worried about him. That's all I felt from everybody in the room is let's go make sure he's okay. Let's go check.
It was a ridiculous allegation with no evidence whatsoever against Biggie. I talked to the Manhattan police. The cops thought it was just a crime of convenience. They saw Tupac and his guys loaded with gold, jewelry all over their necks and on their bodies, and so they just ripped it off of them.
Tupac could not be convinced otherwise. No one has ever been charged with this crime.
That really severed their relationship. You know, the lines that one crosses that we can't go back from.
2 old friends are now mortal enemies. This pivotal event marks the beginning of what could only be described as a collision course with murder.
I wasn't around Pac at the time to know who was in his ear, but I do know for sure that there was people in his ear because how he was towards Big and how Big was towards him as best friends and what it turned into, somebody's putting negativity in your ear.
A day after the shooting, Shakur checks himself out of the hospital as he is due in court to answer to sexual assault charges. He maintains his innocence of the allegations, which stem from an earlier incident with a female fan.
Tupac was outraged with the charge.
He is found guilty. 2 months later, he's sentenced to a maximum of 4.5 years in prison.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart for just destroying everything I worked for the past 22 years.
It crushed him, like really crushed him. We talked about it a lot. He was devastated.
Tupac goes to prison, tormented and broke.
He was financially strapped while he was in prison. He had trusted his business manager to make good decisions for him, and things weren't done to protect his money. Tupac and I communicated through letters. He was very afraid of New York and how New York kind of sticks together. He felt like the entire coast was against him. Prison changed Pac a bit. He learned who his friends were.
Pac didn't want to be in jail. Who want to be in jail? And we were hearing all kinds of things in the media about what he was going through being in there.
Being in prison, it devastated him so much. He did become more angry and more frustrated, and he got a little jaded. Once you get crushed and broken, it's hard to come back from that place.
Rapper Tupac Shakur is in critical condition after 2 rounds of surgery in Las Vegas. He was shot several times over the weekend in a drive-by attack. Doctors say he will survive his 2nd shooting in 2 years.
Friends, family, and fans are desperately hoping for Tupac to pull through.
I was going to go to Vegas, but they kept saying he was going to be okay.
I just knew that he got shot and he would heal because he was a fighter. He was a warrior. He was a survivor.
He survives everything. The guy's a phoenix. Just the notion that his body would stop functioning seemed bizarre. I mean, this is Tupac. He's gonna live. Of course he's gonna live.
The investigation into the shooting has uncovered information about Tupac's whereabouts before the attack on the Strip.
About 3 days after Tupac was shot, the police were talking to some of the entourage and whatnot. They find out that they were at the fight, the MGM Grand. And right after the fight, there was an altercation. So this was very, very, very beneficial information.
Investigators need to uncover the details of the altercation, and so look into the activities of Shakur and Knight in the lead-up to the shooting. Their night began at the boxing event of the year, Mike Tyson's battle for the heavyweight championship.
In '96, a Mike Tyson fight was the biggest ticket in the country. And anybody who's a baller is getting in there. The testosterone just sort of comes through you in this electric way, just as an audience member at a fight.
Among those lucky enough to score tickets are Tupac, Suge Knight, and their crew.
We was going to the best fight. We was that close. We're gonna go spend some money. We're gonna enjoy ourselves. Vegas was our playground. We got to Vegas, man, and we were expecting to have a great time like we did as usual.
Tyson defeats his opponent in under 2 minutes. Investigators find out it wasn't the only fight of the night.
So police at that point, they go to the MGM and they find out from security that there was a fight, an altercation with Tupac and his entourage and this one man, beating and stomping on him. There was no incident report, no nothing, no record of it happening until a videotape showed up.
I was there. Pac took off and caught up on the guy. Pac and Suge started fighting this dude and everything. All you see is legs, arms. I don't know who we fighting. All I know is it's a fight and this is one of the enemies. That's all I know.
Shockingly, security at the MGM Grand didn't hold or question anyone involved in the incident.
Didn't even question Tupac or anybody. They just let those guys walk away.
We just clearly walked right out of the door. I can't even believe that we were even able to make it out of that place like that. I mean, just because of how many police stay in Vegas and how much security and tight security is.
The guy who got beat up, they let him go and no incident report, no nothing. So police at that point knew that he was from South Central, LA, Compton area. All they had was a first name, and I believe it was the security officer who remembered his first name as being Orlando. So Vegas police contacted Compton gang cops who came in to Vegas to look at the videotape, and they say, oh, that's Orlando Anderson. He's a gangbanger in the Crips out of South Central.
Tupac identified that he had some kind of beef. He identified that's the person, Orlando.
Well, if there was a fight and there's a shooting afterward, and this kid's from South Central and he's a gang member, isn't there a possibility they're related?
Investigators continue looking into Tupac's history and his time in prison. In 1994, while serving his sentence for sexual assault, Tupac files an appeal.
Calendar Tupac, Amaru, Shakur.
He is isolated and still reeling from what he perceived as the quad shooting betrayal.
He's in prison, times is rough, he has no money, he's locked away. Pac talked about Biggie never visited me in prison, as if this was proof that he had wanted him shot, or he had ill will, or they weren't friends anymore.
All those friends that was saying that they was friends and they cared about him so much and they had all those millions. Out of all those celebrity friends, nobody ever visits the prison. He had been sentenced and he was serving time.
Tupac has very few visitors in prison, but Suge Knight visits repeatedly, which makes a big impression on Tupac. Knight wants Tupac to sign with Death Row Records.
I accompanied Suge on at least 2 to 3 occasions going up to the upstate New York prison. And he pretty much confided in me things that him and Tupac talked about. I learned that he suspected that Puffy and Biggie had some knowledge that he was going to get shot or robbed at the Quad Studio.
In my opinion, Tupac Shakur was not a criminally minded person. He certainly wasn't a hardened criminal. His problems came because of the people that he associated with. And I think that, his own temper would get him in trouble sometimes.
Tupac pretty much told Suge that when he came home, he was going to destroy Bad Boy Records as a record label and as a crew. That was Suge's reasoning for the statements that he made at the Source Awards.
A speech at a music awards show that August further escalates the tension in the music industry.
The Source Awards was an annual hip-hop show that was held in New York at the time. All the biggest hip-hop names were in attendance.
Death Row Records wins the award for Soundtrack of the Year.
When Suge turned around and told me to come and go up there with him. What? Now you can see on the video, I almost ran. I'm bumping into him, I'm on his heel. I didn't know he was gonna go up there and do that on the awards.
Although he only addresses the crowd for a few moments, Knight's words cut through the audience like a knife.
I think I might have been maybe 10 seats back from the stage. I am Selwyn Seyfu Hines, former editor of The Source magazine, the one-time Bible of hip-hop. And even before he said anything, I thought that this is gonna go somewhere, man.
He comes to the front of the stage, he's like, if you want to be a rapper and you don't want to have the CEO all in the videos, and come to Death Row.
A lot of people took that as a direct insult to Bad Boy Records and at Puffy, who was known for being on his artist records and dancing in the videos.
It's Death Row Records giving New York the finger. And the New York audience was like, whoa, what was that?
There was so much noise, you could hear the boos and you could hear the clapping and you just couldn't tell. You couldn't tell who was with you and who wasn't.
Puffy was hurt through the whole thing. Surprised him when it went down. It was unbelievable for him and everybody else. Like, wow, where did this come from? How's this happening?
I understand why Suge did that, because at that point in time, he was trying to woo Tupac to come to Death Row and sign to the label. So it was a very savvy business move on his part, because he publicly said, I've got your back.
I could feel the future, right? And it feels whack. It feels like this is just not gonna go down a good road.
I sat in the audience. I read the energy like everybody else. I said to myself, damn, this is getting real.
Suge Knight's public attack officially ignites a war between the West Coast Death Row Records and East Coast's Bad Boy Records.
Here comes the East-West beef. Now it's on.
It got serious after the Source Awards. After we left New York, it was really serious. Death threats were coming in. Security had to, tighten up. We were in bulletproof vests every day.
2 months after this explosive acceptance speech, Tupac's appeal is granted, but a bond of over $1.4 million is required to get him out of jail. Knight bails him out.
Suge was excited that Tupac had agreed to sign to Death Row Records. and that Tupac would be coming home on an appeal bond.
Nobody put their money where their mouth is but Suge. Nobody wrote the check but Suge.
His investment pays off. Tupac aligns himself firmly with Suge Knight by signing with Death Row Records.
From what I could see, it was a 3-album deal with one of the biggest labels in the world, and he felt that Suge would be able to protect him.
There was already a lot of controversy that was happening with Death Row at that time, and I did express my fears with Pac about him signing with Death Row. And he said, I know what I'm doing. Was I afraid for him? Of course. Could you tell him anything? Not at all.
You look back on the trajectory of what happened with Big and Pac, and you feel like there were signposts, right? And there were things that said, past this point, some things feel like they're inevitable. When Pac signed Death Row, that set the bomb off.
Coming up, if the investigation into his shooting is too slow,
I felt that Pac was trying to tell me something.
will Tupac ID his own shooter?
He looked at me dead in my eyes and I said, do you know who did this to you?
In 1996, hip-hop megastar Tupac Shakur is shot in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas.
While stopping at this intersection, a car with 4 people pulled up and opened fire on Shakur and Knight.
He is severely injured internally. He has multiple gunshot wounds to the chest.
Tupac was in critical condition and he was put on life support.
As police investigate what looks to them like a gang shooting, another theory suggests that the East Coast-West Coast rivalry may be to blame.
Either you were Team Tupac or you were Team Biggie. You know, it really was extremely divisive.
I don't think people realized how far this beef would go.
Investigators are forced to dig deeper.
We looked historically at Tupac Shakur's own personal background.
Big and Pac was best friends.
They had a falling out, so that was the true beef.
Tupac felt Big had played a role in what happened to him.
The East Coast-West Coast rivalry continues growing, and an isolated Tupac Shakur signs with Death Row Records.
Was I afraid for him? Of course. Could you tell him anything?
And the collision course with a murder narrows.
I don't think that we recognized how the gangs had infiltrated the music industry.
Police also became aware of an incident in Las Vegas just hours before Tupac's shooting.
So police go to the MGM and they find out there was an altercation with Tupac and his entourage and this kid from South Central, Orlando Anderson.
Could a music rivalry really be to blame? Or was the shooting payback for a violent assault? It's day 5 in the hospital, and Tupac is still in critical condition. Investigators are still uncovering information about the physical assault at the MGM Grand before Tupac was shot.
As a reporter, it was very beneficial to me to have access to the police department. After I learned about the altercation near the lobby at the MGM Grand, my question was, why Tupac and his entourage stomped on Orlando Anderson. My research took me to a few weeks earlier at a shopping center and a shoe store that Orlando Anderson was there, and so was one of Tupac's backup singers.
Trayvon Lane was at the mall with one of his friends, and some guys from the Compton Southside Crips noticed him wearing a Death Row chain.
Orlando supposedly yanked this chain, a big medallion gold necklace that Suge Knight had given him, stole it from him. Somebody in the gang wanted a Death Row medallion. And so, hey, anybody can get this for me. I'll give you so much money for it.
They were bounty hunt out for anybody that had a Death Row chain on.
Death Row chain, it's a symbol of being a part of a family. Death Row at that time was a family. So So having that chain on gave him power. It's sort of like the kryptonite in Superman. His power was taken. So it has a very high significance. It's very disrespectful. And it not only disrespects the person whose chain was taken, now it disrespects all of death row.
No one knows what Trayvon whispered in Tupac's ear. Tupac, take off and go over there and jump the guy himself.
The whole beatdown of Orlando Anderson was over a gold necklace.
It wasn't an East Coast and West Coast things. It was two labels that was at each other's throat.
Police must take a step back to look at the history of both hip-hop labels and uncover if or why such a provocative action might have been taken. In 1995, Tupac signs with Death Row Records and is released from prison. He doesn't waste any time getting to work.
Once Pac is at Death Row, he's financially comfortable, he's got professional purpose, and the work ethic is legendary. He bangs out tons of songs per session. He works very, very fast.
He felt like a guy who, in some part of his universe, was like, I got X amount of time to do X amount of things, and I gotta get them done.
But he wanted to make some money, and he wanted to beat the case because he wasn't for sure if he had to go back to prison or not, because he was out on an appeal bond.
Still holding a grudge from the Quad Studio shooting, Tupac retaliates in June of 1996 with the release of a song titled Hit 'Em Up.
Hit 'Em Up was, pretty rough, in your face, badass diss track that just would not be ignored.
Some of the insults on Hit 'Em Up included attacks on Puffy, Biggie, the entire Bad Boy staff. And there was also an insult directed towards Biggie in terms of Tupac saying that he slept with his wife, Faith Evans.
He has a line where, he said if Faith have twins, she'd probably have Tupacs. It seems so stupid.
Tupac Shakur was kind of running his mouth with the lyrics, talking about killing bad boy kids. And if you ever heard the song Hit 'Em Up, it's a very telling song.
I remember I was with Big when he first found out about that video. I'm Charlie Baltimore. I'm a rapper. I also was in a relationship with the Notorious B.I.G. We were at a video shoot, Big and I, when Puff came flying up, riding up with this, tape of this video, and he's like, y'all gotta watch this right now. I knew Big really well. He just looked devastated. Like, he just couldn't really grasp the anger that Pac had. It hurt him because at one point they were friends. At the same time, Puff took it very seriously. He was really upset about it.
This collision course may have reached the point of no return.
Pac and Suge were pressing it really hard, and it just kept getting louder and louder and louder.
Big was just the hottest rapper. He knew he was the hottest rapper. So if he didn't do anything, how are people going to perceive that? He, in defense, had no choice but to defend, his territory.
Fans and people behind the scenes in the music industry felt like they had to choose a side. And Pac was on Death Row, which was the West Coast, versus Biggie, who was on Bad Boy, which was the East Coast. And it became a huge, huge thing.
Both record labels appear to be increasing their own security during this time.
It was a rumor that during that time that Puffy had agreed to hire Southside Crips to be the bodyguards for Notorious B.I.G. And of course, that would be because the Southside Crips have a natural enemy in the Bloods, who were part of Suge's camp.
Sean Combs has unequivocally denied compensating Crips for security. Suge Knight is taking a different approach.
Suge Knight had a security company called Right Way Protection Agency. And the head of that security agency was a guy named Reggie Wright Jr., who was a former Compton police officer. And Reggie Wright would in turn hire police officers, off-duty officers that would moonlight for death row.
Shakur security were police. LAPD.
I had good qualified cops. I had cops from Compton Police Department. I had cops from the City of Long Beach Police Department, from even the LA County Sheriff's Department.
The beef is totally out of control. You had guys from the street, massive egos, tons of money. It was a truly dangerous situation.
Cars are on a collision course, and you can jump in between them and wave your hands all you like, but they're gonna crash. Those cars were gonna crash.
Coming up, loved ones plead at Tupac's bedside.
And Pac opens up his eyes and he looks at me. I said, he don't want us to go.
Desperately hoping for crucial information.
I don't know what he was trying to tell me.
And later, police lean on a new and critical lead.
We put her in a precarious situation to force her to tell us what she knew.
September 13th, 1996. Tupac Shakur has been in the hospital 6 days after being critically wounded in a drive-by shooting.
I just tell him, I say, you know, everybody's praying for you. Everybody is here wishing. I was like, you just have to be strong. You gonna make it.
During the 6 days that Pac was in intensive care or whatever, I remember Big thinking that he was going to pull through. Nobody thought that Tupac was going to die because, 6 days and you're still kind of, you're fighting. We kind of thought he was going to pull through.
I came out here to show my support for Tupac and his family and to let everybody know that all this East Coast, West Coast, that stuff needs to stop because it's black on black crime.
With the killer still on the loose and death threats being called in, his security guards are on high alert.
It wasn't just a shooting. It was supposed to be kill him.
But soon, everyone's attention turns to Tupac's rapidly deteriorating condition.
Tupac started suffering from respiratory failure, and he took a turn for the worse. Things wasn't looking good at all.
It almost felt like a wake because, everybody knew that he might die because he wasn't improving.
I remember Danny Boy crying, balled up, rolling on his side, balled up, crying. And his mom said, you gotta go right in. She said, then I'll let nobody else see him. And I said, then I'll let nobody else see. She said, you're gonna be the last one. I go in to see Pac. And I said, you can hear me? He goes. I said, you can hear me? I said, you know we love you, don't you? You know we love you, he said. I said, do you know who did this to you? I said, do you know who did this to you? He said. And I said, you know who did this to you? He said, no. And I said, you're gonna make it. Somebody comes out of the room. It wasn't nobody from the hospital. I don't know if it was from Suge's camp or security that Pac had with him. And they say, it's time for you guys to go. He said, it's time for you guys to go. And Pac opens up his eyes. He looked at me dead in my eyes. He said, mm-mm. I said, he don't want us to go. I struggle with this to this day. I felt that Pac was trying to tell me something. What was he trying to tell me? I don't know. I don't know what he was trying to tell me.
Did Tupac know who shot him? No one gets the answer to that question. 6 days after that fateful night in Las Vegas, Tupac is pronounced dead. He was 25 years old.
It's just sad that, wow, I said I wasn't gonna do this. I'm not supposed to cry. But it's just sad that that somebody that's so gifted and to be so young. To be so young, and if he could just hear the young people that I hear say, Pac saved my life. Pac saved my life. He helped me make it through when I was going through something. And I don't think he had, I don't think he had the opportunity to see who he helped.
As the news of Tupac's death spreads, the hip-hop community is stunned.
My reaction when Tupac died was shock, like the rest of the world. I was devastated when I heard that he passed away. I thought he was going to live forever. He was indestructible. He was Tupac.
It was one of the most devastating moments in hip-hop history. Hip-hop lost one of its most influential artists, in every sense of the word, artist.
Despite their severed friendship, Biggie is beside himself when he hears the news.
That was his brother, no matter what was going on. I think Big always felt like that was still his friend, still his brother. And he was in disbelief, like and hurt, and knew it was a loss to him, to the world, you know, to everyone. I mean, everyone was in disbelief.
Tupac's official cause of death is listed as a respiratory failure and cardiac arrest from multiple gunshot wounds. The investigation becomes a murder case.
The second he died, it became a homicide. Instead of an attempted murder, it became a murder.
We began to look very closely at individuals whose names had already come up in the case. So we have 3 levels of conflict.
The LAPD identify those levels of conflict as the CEO level with Suge Knight and Sean Combs, the artist level with Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, and the gang level with the natural rivalry between the Bloods and the Crips.
As a detective, you need to be as objective as possible. There were 3 prevailing theories. We treated them all as if they could be true until we could prove otherwise.
Eyes turned toward Suge Knight as possibly being involved.
Some people looked at Suge Knight as the killer due to reports circulating saying that Tupac was planning to leave the label, and people figured that, okay, Suge definitely killed Tupac because Tupac was looking for a way out.
He wanted to start his own label. And as far as I know, his plan was to leave Death Row. I mean, that's what he had said to me.
I don't know where that come from, Tupac was leaving Death Row. You don't just get on a record label and say you want to leave because you want to leave. Suge had invested money into Pac. Pac didn't have no money, obviously, because Pac didn't get himself out of jail.
I was putting together the business plan for Euthanasia Records, and it was Tupac's label. There was part of me that wondered, you know, did Suge play a role in this?
I think even somebody as crazy and tough as Suge would understand that if we're gonna kill this person, and I'm gonna sit here, and the gunman's gonna be here. That doesn't make any sense. The bullets are flying at Suge. He could have been killed too.
Also, Pac would have been worth more alive than dead because he could market and promote and tour and do all the things that an artist does to make it even more profitable.
Investigators also look closely at the Crips connection, and a few weeks later, get a tip on Orlando Anderson, the man beaten in the MGM Grand just hours before Tupac was shot.
A month after Tupac Shakur was shot, during a gang roundup, Compton PD went into Orlando Anderson's house and found a Glock and Tupac Shakur was shot with a Glock.
Orlando's name had came up for a number of things back in those days. He was very active in the city.
We took into consideration the idea that maybe the shooting was just a simple retaliation for the beatdown that had taken place at the MGM.
In investigations, you have three things. You've got motive, means, and opportunity. Orlando Anderson had the opportunity, had the means because he happened to own a Glock gun, and he had the motive, and the motive was he got beaten up by Tupac and his gang, and he turned around and retaliated and shot Tupac. So all three ingredients are there. And that is what you call circumstantial evidence.
Had investigators found Tupac's murderer? Or is there more to this story? A month after Tupac Shakur was murdered in Las Vegas, while looking into gang connections, police tracked down Crips member Orlando Anderson, the man beaten in the MGM Grand by Tupac's entourage just hours before Tupac's murder.
Compton PD went into Orlando Anderson's house and found a Glock, and Tupac Shakur was shot with a Glock. Vegas police opted not to take the gun as evidence. They opted not to arrest or even question Orlando Anderson.
Orlando's name came up in almost every negative thing that happened in Compton at that time.
I was told by Vegas police, the detectives themselves, that they didn't think the evidence was there. Vegas didn't want a big trial with a bunch of black people and thugs in their minds coming to town, and I believe that's what motivated them in not pursuing the investigation.
When black men get killed in America, a lot of people are like, who cares? Especially when they think, he says, in that life, in the hood life, whatever, rapper life, hood life, black man gets shot by a black man, take him to the morgue, let's keep it moving.
Another theory still being investigated is the record label rivalry, which includes Puffy Combs and Biggie Smalls.
There was already a history of violence that had taken place, and Suge Knight made it very clear that Sean Combs was in a very precarious situation.
There were all sorts of rumors, and there were definitely lots of people who wanted to find some way of saying it was Puff who had killed Pac. He had hired someone. That never made sense to me. How are we pointing a finger at Big and Puff? Now they're contract killers, or they're contracting killers, or like these mafia dons? Like, no, these are record business people.
At the end of 1996, Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight is sent to prison for a parole violation due to his participation in the beating of Orlando Anderson. On the East Coast, rapper Biggie Smalls is getting ready to launch his much-anticipated second album and has appearances scheduled on the West Coast.
I don't think anybody thought that was the end of the East Coast, West Coast thing. We knew that it was physically dangerous for East Coast rappers to spend a lot of time in LA.
Even if Knight is behind bars, will a Bad Boys record Entourage be safe on the West Coast? March 8, 1997, just 6 months after the murder of Tupac Shakur, the Soul Train Awards are held in LA.
The Soul Train Awards is a huge celebration for artists in black entertainment.
Tupac Shakur is awarded Album of the Year. Insiders head to the after party at the Peterson Automotive Museum.
The party was packed with like all the A-listers in hip hop.
This is hip hop like at its fanciest heights, with our hair all the way down, enjoying ourselves spiritually, musically, mentally. I don't think Biggie stopped smiling that entire night.
I mean, when you go to LA, it's a party. It's just fly. Living it up in LA, I walk into the party and I see Big in our section, and he was, emotion, pulled me over, puts me on his lap. And I sit there and we catch up, hanging out with my brother.
Shortly after midnight, this massive hip-hop party is abruptly shut down by fire marshals because of overcrowding. Biggie and his entourage are some of the first to leave, while hundreds of others follow.
I get in my car with my homeboy Sean, and we pull out. And we're talking and we're playing music and we're in a line of cars. We're maybe, 10 or 12 cars from the corner. And there's a black SUV at the light.
Biggie's SUV is first in a long line of vehicles, stopped at a red light. Suddenly, a black Impala pulls up alongside it.
We just hear, and we go, gunshots, and we both duck down. And the gunshots fade away, and we look up, and I see the SUV turn and just break out of there.
Biggie's entourage rushes him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. According to reports, 6 shots were fired. Biggie was hit 4 times. Moments later, at 1:15 a.m., he is pronounced dead. He was 24 years old.
Once we got to the hospital, we found out the news that he had passed on. And it was just unbelievable. It was just crazy.
It's unfortunate, It's just so sad to
I was just lost. I was just really, I was devastated.
News of Biggie Smalls' death spreads throughout the world.
I remember leaving the studio and breaking down crying, and I will never forget how quiet Brooklyn was that morning. Nobody was outside. You didn't hear anything. It was so eerie. I never heard Brooklyn that quiet.
The hip-hop community reacted with shock, with sadness. There was a lot of soul-searching, I think, in terms of people saying, how did this happen?
Almost immediately, a flood of speculation, rumors, and conspiracy theories begin to circulate.
Coming so close to the killing of Pac, it was like, what the hell is this?
When Biggie died, similar to Pac, people automatically thought that it was connected. Both murders took place as a drive-by shooting at night, so it was eerily similar.
LAPD launched an investigation into Biggie's murder, starting with the witnesses at the crime scene. But they're of little help.
There were very few witnesses that saw anything of value. Now, you have to keep in mind how quickly these type of things unfold. In a matter of seconds. Initial reaction when you hear gunfire is to take cover, you hide, you run away. There wasn't anybody getting a license plate. There was vague descriptions of the car. Even those individuals that were in Biggie's vehicle gave very, very vague information about what they were able to see.
Who would want Biggie dead?
Biggie Smalls' murder, 6 months after Tupac was killed, the immediate thing was they have to be related. It's a drive-by shooting, happened at night in a crowded area outside an event. Tupac was headed to one, Biggie was coming out of one. They were with their entourage, the whole thing.
As a detective, you need to be as objective as possible. You don't just believe into anything. It's best not to have preconceived notions about what took place.
LAPD solved a number of different homicides. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to solve this one.
Coming up, a lawsuit sparks a brand new investigation, uncovering explosive allegations.
It was an investigation that had been resurrected as a result of a lawsuit against the city, alleging that Los Angeles police officers were involved in the murder and the police department covered it up.
Just 6 months after hip-hop megastar Tupac Shakur is murdered in a drive-by shooting on the Las Vegas Strip, his one-time friend and successful artist Biggie Smalls is also murdered in a drive-by shooting in L.A. Many hip-hop insiders are quickly suspicious of rival record label Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight.
When you're in a national public beef with somebody, and then you get killed, people are going to look at the person you were in the beef with. I think from the beginning, folks assumed it's got to be Suge.
Suge Knight's name came out that it was retaliation for Tupac because supposedly he thought Biggie Smalls had something to do with it.
Rumors circle quickly, suggesting how Suge Knight might have orchestrated the hit.
There was a theory that Suge Knight had requested LAPD associates to murder Biggie.
Suge had LAPD working for him. In order to get away with this, there had to be police involvement.
Incredibly, the investigation into Biggie's murder stalls.
I've talked to the LAPD, all different cops, from beginning to end, and they switched investigators periodically in the Biggie Smalls case. There are a lot of unsolved murders at the time, a lot of inside beefs going on inside the police department, and they weren't as cohesive as they had been in the past.
The investigation into the murder of Biggie Smalls goes cold until 6 years later, in 2002, when his mother, Voletta Wallace, launches a lawsuit against the LAPD, claiming they were instrumental in her son's murder.
Initially, the investigation that I became involved in was focused just on Biggie Smalls. It was a cold case investigation that had been resurrected as a result of a lawsuit against the city, alleging that Los Angeles police officers were possibly involved in the murder, and the police department covered it up. So the department got together some detectives and formed a task force and asked us to reinvestigate the murder itself.
The validity of the LAPD investigating itself was hard for those closest to the case to swallow.
I think that the LAPD will have a very hard time getting to the bottom of a case that has a lot of LAPD members somehow involved.
The more we looked at those claims and what the lawsuit was saying, we realized that there was no validity to it. It was all contrived information and based all on jailhouse informants.
With the lawsuit still pending, Kading uncovers shocking additional information in his investigation. It leads police to another theory, that it wasn't the LAPD, but other associates of Suge Knight that helped carry out the hit on Biggie.
We came across a female associate of Suge's. This female associate, we've used the alias of Teresa Swan, and we sat her down. She could either tell us what she knew, or she might be going to jail, and so we put her in a precarious situation to force her to tell us what she knew.
Teresa Swan is the ex-girlfriend or a baby mama or whatever she is to Suge Knight, and is the one who is singing like a bird.
According to Teresa Swan, she told us that after the shooting of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas, that he was enraged that somebody had murdered his #1 artist and his close friend, somebody he cared about very dearly, and that he was going to get revenge. At the time that Biggie was murdered, Suge Knight had already been in jail for quite some time. She informed us that she had gone and visited Suge under the pretense that she was a legal aid for Suge's lawyer, which would allow her into the county jail where she could have unmonitored visits with Suge Knight. And Suge Knight had solicited the murder of Biggie Smalls and asked her to make the arrangements.
She said, Wardell Poochie Fouts is the guy who was hired by Suge Knight to kill Biggie Smalls.
Is it possible Biggie's killer has been found? Just when Biggie's friends and family think maybe they'll finally find justice in his case, the LAPD are hit with a roadblock.
After receiving this information, we came to the unfortunate realization that the person she's identified as the shooter has been dead for years. He died in another unrelated gang action, so unfortunately you can't interview a dead man.
With this new information, Biggie's estate drops their lawsuit against the LAPD.
Once the department found out that we had this confessing co-conspirator, that information was then passed on to the attorneys that were representing the estate of Biggie Smalls. They retracted their lawsuit, knowing that it was a losing proposition to try to further it.
And no charges are brought against Suge Knight for Biggie Smalls' murder.
Unfortunately, in the practicality of prosecuting this case, you got a he said, she said type of scenario, and the DA's office decided not to prosecute.
Suge Knight could have done it. He could have had it done, but there's no evidence.
Once that was done, the LAPD began to look at the case with less interest in solving it, recognizing they're out from under this huge potential lawsuit or judgment, and the investigation lost its steam, and no further effort was made.
The hip-hop community is frustrated, as many theories are still prevalent, but no one is prosecuted or even arrested.
Why hasn't his murder been solved? I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me that people was there. People saw what happened, yet still, there's no answers.
I'm just in disbelief.
Incredibly, Tupac's case also remains unsolved. Unexpectedly, in April of 2017, Suge Knight makes a stunning new claim.
So after 20 years, Suge Knight broke his silence and said that he knew who killed Tupac. Suge Knight's latest theory is his ex-wife and his former bodyguard, they wanted to kill him to try to take over Death Row Records, but by mistake killed Tupac. His ex-wife has denied the claim.
Whether the theory will be investigated further remains to be seen. Suge Knight isn't the first person to present new theories of the case, and he likely won't be the last.
If you had a penny, you had a story. You know, people had stories. They knew what was going on. West Coast people, gang people, Suge Knight, Puffy, like it was a million stories.
I'm sure there are people out there that do know what happened to Pac and Big, and it's just sad that, you know, there's no resolution to either death.
With the benefit of hindsight, it seems that Tupac and Biggie's friendship, careers, and lives were somehow put on a collision course that ended tragically with both of their murders.
This atmosphere was created by huge egos and competition, and then bloodshed, and then ultimately murder.
You know, in retrospect, when you start looking at it, it's like the two biggest rappers. You're kind of hoping and praying that this is not caused by anything that the press stirred up as some East Coast, West Coast beef.
You know, for us to lose two of the greatest rap artists of all times over something this stupid is it's just not acceptable.
It kills me. I mean, just the loss of both these guys just still kills me.
I don't know if there'll ever be justice for the fans of Tupac and Biggie. I believe that we were all robbed of two very influential people who could have used their influence in a greater way had they lived longer than they did.
I think people definitely felt like just these deaths took a lot out of hip hop. Just the soul and spirit of hip hop was damaged by all that.
Even all these years after their deaths, their music remains their biggest legacies.
You know, Tupac's legacy, of course, will always be his music. I hope that he will go down in history as a man who had tremendous value to hip-hop. He changed hip-hop.
You got rappers out right now in 2017 still reciting Big's rhymes in their lyrics. 20 years later, the legacy that Biggie has left is like unmatched. There will never ever be another B.I.G.
Biggie Smalls' second album, eerily titled Life After Death, released just over 2 weeks after his death, has become one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time, selling over 10 million copies.
First I heard Life After Death was at Daddy's house, which was Puff's studio. And they played the album from beginning to end. Everybody in the room just starts clapping.
To this day, I'm overjoyed with the amount of people that love his music and celebrate his life.
You're still talking about Biggie. His music lives on. You still know all his lyrics. If you talk about hip hop, you still know who Biggie is.
Tupac Shakur has sold over 75 million records worldwide and has had several platinum albums released posthumously.
Tupac had a very high standard for quality of music, and he had no fear.
Pac was different. I remember the first time I heard him rap. I listened like I never listened to anybody before in my life, with so much heart, with so much empathy, with so much tell me more. I love the way he could tell a story.
Pac was so good at what he did. You couldn't outwork him. You couldn't out-record him. You couldn't outright him. Pac was music, man. Pac was poetry.
Tupac and Biggie, they're two of the best-selling hip-hop artists of all time. Their music still speaks to people today, and their murders still remain as two of the biggest unsolved murders in music history.
Tune in to Oxygen.com for more.
The file was buried for 30 years. Not destroyed. Not lost. Not forgotten completely. Just hidden beneath layers of dust, old paperwork, and years of silence inside a forgotten evidence room where nobody expected to find answers. But inside that file was a secret. A secret that had waited decades for someone to open the right folder, read the right page, and ask the one question that everyone else had stopped asking. What really happened that night? The town of Black Hollow had learned to live with unanswered questions. For most people, the past was something that stayed behind them. Old streets changed. Old buildings disappeared. Old memories faded. But some stories refused to disappear. Some stories stayed alive in whispers, in conversations that stopped when strangers walked by, in photographs kept inside forgotten drawers, in names that people still remembered but rarely spoke aloud. And for 30 years, one name carried the weight of mystery that nobody could solve. Evelyn Carter, a young woman whose disappearance became the darkest chapter in Black Hollow's history. On a cold autumn evening in 1994, Evelyn left her apartment after receiving a phone call. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her alive. No dramatic goodbye. No warning. No obvious sign that anything was wrong. Just a quiet evening. A normal night. Until it wasn't. The next morning, her car was discovered near an abandoned road outside town. The driver's door was unlocked. The keys were still inside. Her personal belongings were untouched. But Evelyn was gone. And that single discovery changed everything. The search began before sunrise. Police officers moved through the surrounding woods. Volunteers walked through fields and abandoned properties. Neighbors answered questions. Friends were interviewed. Every possibility was considered. At first, investigators believed the case would be solved quickly. They believed the answer was close. They believed someone knew something. Because people do not simply vanish without leaving something behind. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. And the answers never came. The investigation slowly became something else. A cold case. A file that remained open but motionless. A mystery trapped in time. Black Hollow was a small town where everyone knew everyone. That was what made Evelyn's disappearance so disturbing. People believed they would notice if something was wrong. They believed they would know if someone dangerous was nearby. But the truth was different. The truth was that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries happen in ordinary places. Quiet places. Places where people feel safe. For years, the town tried to understand what happened. Some believed Evelyn had left voluntarily. Some believed she had discovered something she was never supposed to find. Others believed the answer was hidden somewhere much closer than anyone wanted to admit. Rumors spread. Stories changed. Memories became uncertain. And slowly, the investigation began fading from public attention. But one person never stopped searching. Detective Daniel Reeves. He was one of the original investigators assigned to Evelyn's disappearance. In 1994, he was young, ambitious, determined to solve every case that crossed his desk. He believed every missing person had a story. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every unanswered question deserved attention. But Evelyn's case became the one case he could never close. The years passed. Technology changed. The police department changed. The people involved changed. But Reeves kept the original file. Not because he wanted to remember failure, because he believed the truth was still somewhere inside those pages. 30 years later, retired and living quietly away from the department, Reeves received a phone call that brought him back to the investigation he thought he would never revisit. A former evidence technician had discovered something unusual while organizing archived records. A forgotten envelope. A piece of evidence that had never been properly examined. Something that had been sitting inside the system for decades, waiting. When Reeves opened the old file again, he noticed something immediately. The case looked different, not because the facts had changed, but because the world had changed. Technology that did not exist in 1994 now had the ability to examine evidence in ways investigators could only imagine. The forgotten evidence suddenly became important. The old photographs, the original reports, the handwritten notes. Every detail received another look. And then they found it, a small piece of information hidden inside the old investigation. A detail that had been overlooked. A connection nobody noticed. A clue that could change everything. For 30 years, Black Hollow believed Evelyn Carter's story had no ending. But the forgotten file suggested something else. The story was not over. It had only been waiting. The investigation reopened quietly. No announcements. No public attention. Just a small group of investigators returning to a mystery that had survived 3 decades. They knew the risks. They knew old cases were complicated. Memories fade. Witnesses disappear. Evidence deteriorates. But they also knew something else. The truth does not always disappear with time. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it remains untouched until someone finally looks again. As investigators examined forgotten file, they discovered that the original investigation had been closer to the answer than anyone realized. The clues had always been there, but they were scattered, disconnected, hidden among thousands of details. The challenge was putting them together, because the truth was buried beneath 30 years of silence. And now, someone was finally digging. The town of Black Hollow was about to discover that the mystery they thought they knew was not the real story. The disappearance of Evelyn Carter was not just a missing person case. It was something deeper, something darker, something that had remained hidden since that night in 1994. And inside the forgotten file was a first sign that the truth was finally ready to come out. The first clue was not dramatic. There was no shocking confession. No sudden discovery that immediately explained everything. It was a small detail, a single line written in an old investigation report that had been ignored for 30 years, a note from an officer who had worked the case in 1994, a sentence written quickly in the corner of a page, something that seemed insignificant at the time. But now, with new eyes and new technology, it looked different. It looked like the beginning of an answer. The investigators studying Evelyn Carter's disappearance knew that cold cases rarely reveal their secrets all at once. They unfold slowly, piece by piece, memory by memory, clue by clue. The past does not open easily, especially after 30 years. The first step was rebuilding the timeline. They returned to the night Evelyn disappeared, the last confirmed sighting, the last phone call, The abandoned road where a car was found. Every moment was examined again. Every assumption was questioned, because in an old investigation, the smallest mistake can become the biggest obstacle. And sometimes the answer is hidden inside the things everyone believed they already understood. Evelyn Carter had been 32 years old when she vanished. She was known in Black Hollow as someone who kept a quiet life. She worked at the local historical archive, a place filled with old records, photographs, and forgotten stories from the town's past. People described her as curious, patient, someone who loved uncovering things that others ignored. That detail became more important when investigators reopened the case, because they discovered that in the weeks before her disappearance, Evelyn had been researching something unusual, something outside her normal work, something connected to a collection of old town records that had recently been transferred into the archive. At the time, nobody considered it important. In 1994, investigators believed the key to her disappearance would be found through witnesses, physical evidence, or direct confrontation. They did not know that the answer might be hidden inside documents, inside history, inside something Evelyn herself had discovered. The new investigation began examining those records. Old property documents, newspaper archives, personal notes, letters, anything connected to Evelyn's final weeks. The more they searched, the stranger the picture became. Evelyn had not simply been looking through old records. She had been following a trail that led back decades, a trail involving a forgotten event that many people in Black Hollow had tried to leave behind. The investigators quickly realized something disturbing. Evelyn may have disappeared because she found something someone did not want uncovered. That possibility changed the entire direction of the case. For years, investigators had searched for the person responsible for her disappearance. Now they had to ask a different question. What had Evelyn discovered? The answer could explain everything. The new team contacted people who had known Evelyn in 1994. Many had not spoken about the case in years. Some believed the past should remain buried. Others were surprised that anyone was still searching. But when investigators mentioned the old archive records, some reactions changed. People became quiet. They remembered things they had forgotten. Small conversations, strange encounters, moments that seemed meaningless 30 years earlier. One former co-worker remembered Evelyn staying late at the archive several nights before she disappeared. Another remembered her appearing nervous, different, distracted, like someone who had discovered something she did not know how to handle. Those memories became important because they suggested Evelyn's disappearance may not have been random. She may have been afraid, and if she was afraid, investigators needed to know why. The search continued through the forgotten materials from the archive. Inside a box labeled with an ordinary description, they found a collection of documents that had never been fully reviewed. Among them was a photograph, old, faded, almost damaged beyond recognition. But there was something unusual about it. A person appeared in the background, someone who was never mentioned in the original investigation, someone who seemed connected to the final days before Evelyn disappeared. The discovery changed the investigation. A new name entered the file. A new direction emerged. And for the first time in 30 years, detectives had a lead that felt different. Not speculation, not rumor, a real connection. But the discovery also created more questions. Who was the person in the photograph? Why had nobody noticed them before? And why did the old report contain no mention of this image? The investigators returned to the original evidence room. They searched through everything connected to Evelyn's case. Boxes that had remained untouched for decades were opened again. Old photographs, recorded interviews, handwritten notes. Every item was reviewed, and slowly a pattern began forming. The original investigation had not failed because there were no clues. It had failed because the clues were separated, pieces of the same story scattered across different places. The forgotten file was bringing them together. As the investigation continued, Detective Reeves returned to Black Hollow. For the first time in years, he walked through the streets where Evelyn's story began. The town looked different. New buildings stood where old ones had been. People had moved away. New families had arrived, but the memory of the disappearance remained. Reeves visited the old police station where the original investigation had started. He opened the same case file he had carried for decades, and for the first time, he noticed something he had missed: a pattern, a connection, a detail that had been hiding in plain sight. 30 years earlier, he had searched for a person. Now, he realized he needed to search for a reason. Why did Evelyn disappear? What did she uncover? And who wanted that discovery to remain hidden? The answers were buried somewhere in Black Hollow's past. And as investigators moved deeper into forgotten records, they discovered something that changed the case forever. Evelyn Carter was not the first person connected to the mystery. There had been another story before hers, another secret, another disappearance that the town had nearly forgotten. And that discovery revealed that Evelyn's case was not a single mystery. It was part of something much bigger. The discovery changed everything. For 30 years, investigators believed Evelyn Carter's disappearance began on the night she vanished. But the forgotten records revealed something different. The story had started long before that night, long before Evelyn walked out of her apartment, long before her car was discovered on the abandoned road. The mystery had been building quietly for years, hidden inside old documents, hidden inside forgotten memories, hidden inside a part of Black Hollow's history that many people wanted to leave behind. The investigators returned to the archive records with a new purpose. They were no longer only searching for Evelyn. They were searching for the reason she started digging. The photograph found inside the old collection became the center of a renewed investigation. It showed a group of people standing outside an old building that had been abandoned for decades. Most of the faces were familiar: local residents, former town officials, people whose names appeared throughout Black Hollow's history. But one person stood apart, a man partially hidden near the edge of the image, a person who seemed to be watching rather than participating. The investigators enhanced the image. They compared it with old records. They searched through newspaper archives, and eventually they identified him. His name was Thomas Vale, a name that appeared only a few times in the original investigation, a name that had never been considered significant. But now, after 30 years, it demanded attention. Thomas Vale had been connected to Black Hollow for decades. He owned several properties around town. He had been involved in local development projects. He was respected by many. But the new investigation uncovered something unusual. In 1994, shortly before Evelyn disappeared, she had requested access to documents connected to one of his properties, a property known as Hollow Creek Estate, an abandoned piece of land outside town, a place that had become the center of rumors for years. Nobody knew exactly what Evelyn was searching for there, but the records showed she had visited the location multiple times. That information had never appeared in the original investigation, and investigators needed to know why. They returned to Hollow Creek Estate. The property had changed dramatically over the years. The old buildings were damaged. The roads were almost gone. Nature had reclaimed much of the area. But beneath the overgrown landscape was a place filled with history, a place where secrets had been buried. The investigators searched carefully. They examined old structures. They looked for anything connected to Evelyn's final days. At first, they found nothing, only abandoned rooms, broken furniture, years of decay. But then, inside a forgotten storage area, they discovered something unexpected: a box, hidden behind damaged walls. Inside were documents, old photographs, personal records, evidence that suggested someone had intentionally removed information from the official archives years earlier. The discovery raised new questions. Who had hidden the box? Why was it removed? And what had Evelyn discovered before she disappeared? The investigation became more complicated, because now the case was not only about a missing woman. It was about a secret that had survived for decades. Detectives began interviewing people who had worked around Hollow Creek Estate. Most claimed they knew nothing. Most said they had forgotten the property completely. But one former employee remembered something. A conversation from 1994. A conversation involving Evelyn. He told investigators that Evelyn had arrived at the property carrying a notebook. She appeared focused, determined. She told him she was searching for proof of something that happened years earlier, something that had been covered up. At the time, he thought she was investigating old history. Now, he wondered if she had discovered something dangerous. The investigators examined Evelyn's own notes. For decades, they had been stored with the original case materials, but nobody had understood their importance. The handwriting revealed a pattern. Names, dates, connections. Evelyn had been building a timeline that connected several events across decades. The first event occurred in the early 1970s. The second happened years later. And the final connection led directly to 1994, the year Evelyn disappeared. The investigators realized something shocking. Evelyn had not been chasing a random mystery. She had been following a chain of events, a chain that someone had worked hard to hide. The more they uncovered, the more complicated the story became. People who had once appeared unrelated were suddenly connected. Old disagreements, missing documents, unexplained decisions. Everything pointed toward a hidden chapter of Black Hollow's history. But the biggest question remained. Why did nobody investigate this before? Why did the original detectives miss these connections? The answer was uncomfortable. Because the people involved were not strangers. They were respected members of the community, people with influence, people whose names carried weight. And in a small town, reputation can sometimes become its own kind of shield. As the investigation continued, Detective Reeves began questioning everything he thought he knew. 30 years earlier, he believed he was searching for a missing person. Now he realized he had been searching through a carefully constructed silence, a silence maintained by fear, by loyalty, by people who believed certain truths should remain buried. But the forgotten file had opened the door, and once that door opened, there was no closing again. The investigators discovered one final detail inside Evelyn's notes, a sentence written only hours before she vanished, a sentence that revealed she knew she was being watched, a sentence that changed the entire investigation. It read, "If anything happens to me, look beneath the place where Black Hollow buried its history." The investigators stared at the words, because they knew exactly what Evelyn meant. There was one place in town that matched that description, a place everyone knew, a place connected to the oldest secrets of Black Hollow, a place that had been abandoned for decades. And now, for the first time since 1994, investigators were preparing to search it again, because somewhere beneath the forgotten parts of the town, Evelyn believed the truth was waiting. The place where Black Hollow buried its history had a name, Old Hollow Cemetery, a forgotten stretch of land beyond the edge of town where the oldest families were buried and where the trees had slowly taken over paths that once connected the graves. For decades, people avoided the place, not because of fear, not because of superstition, but because of what it represented, a reminder of everything the town wanted to leave behind. When Evelyn Carter wrote those words in her notebook, investigators believed she was not speaking metaphorically. She had been searching for something there, something connected to the secrets she uncovered. And now, 30 years later, the same place had become the center of the investigation. The search began before sunrise. No media, no public announcement, only a small group of investigators, forensic specialists, and Detective Daniel Reeves standing at the edge of the cemetery with the old case file in his hands. For Reeves, the moment felt impossible. 3 decades earlier, he had walked through Black Hollow searching for Evelyn. Now he was standing in the same town, following clues that she herself had left behind. The past and present had finally collided. The first hours revealed nothing. The investigators moved carefully between old graves and abandoned paths. They examined the area around the oldest sections of the cemetery. They searched locations connected to the names written inside Evelyn's notebook. Every discovery created more questions. Every question led deeper into the mystery. Then, beneath a section of collapsed stone near an abandoned family plot, they found something. A hidden compartment. Not large, not obvious, but carefully concealed. Inside was a collection of items wrapped in protective material. Old photographs, documents, a small recording device, and a journal. a journal that belonged to someone else. The investigators immediately understood the importance of what they had found. This was not random. Someone had hidden these items intentionally. Someone wanted them preserved, but someone also wanted them forgotten. The journal belonged to a man named Samuel Carter, Evelyn's grandfather, a name that had appeared briefly in the original investigation but was never considered important. That discovery changed the direction of everything, because Evelyn had not only been investigating Black Hollow's history, she had been investigating her own family's connection to it. The journal contained decades of entries, personal thoughts, descriptions of events, names, places, warnings. As investigators read through the pages, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Samuel Carter had spent years documenting things happening around Black Hollow, events he believed were connected, events he believed someone was trying to hide. The first entry that caught investigators' attention was dated 1971. Samuel wrote about a meeting between several influential residents and town officials, a meeting that was never recorded publicly, a meeting involving the future of Hollow Creek Estate, the same property Evelyn had been investigating before she disappeared. According to Samuel's notes, something happened during that meeting, something serious, something that changed relationships inside the town forever. But Samuel never explained everything. His journal contained fragments, half-finished thoughts, references to conversations, hints about people who knew more than they admitted. It was clear he was afraid, and decades later, Evelyn appeared to have followed the same path. She had discovered her grandfather's hidden journal. She had started asking questions, and then she disappeared. The investigators now faced a terrifying possibility. Evelyn may have been close to uncovering the same truth her grandfather spent years trying to document. The question was no longer only what happened to Evelyn. The question became, what did she find? The forensic team examined the items from the hidden compartment, the photographs, the documents, the recording device. Everything was processed carefully, and the first major discovery came from the recordings. The device contained several old audio files. Most were damaged, some were impossible to understand, but one recording remained clear enough to hear. A conversation, recorded decades earlier. A conversation between two people discussing Hollow Creek Estate. The investigators listened in silence. The voices were unfamiliar at first, but as the recording continued, one name was mentioned. Thomas Vale, the same man from a photograph, the same person connected to Evelyn's investigation. The recording did not prove wrongdoing, but it confirmed something important. Thomas Vale knew more about the hidden history of Black Hollow than he had ever admitted. The investigators immediately began searching for him. But there was a problem. Thomas Vale had disappeared from public life years earlier. He left Black Hollow shortly after Evelyn's disappearance. Nobody knew exactly where he went. Some believed he moved away. Others believed he wanted distance from the town. Now, after 30 years, his name had returned to the center of the mystery. Detectives searched through old records, property documents, financial information, travel history, anything that could reveal where he had gone. And then they found something unexpected, a recent address. Thomas Vale was alive, and he had been living under a different name. The discovery sent shock through the investigation, because for 3 decades, one of the most important people connected to Evelyn's disappearance had been living quietly away from Black Hollow. But why? Why leave? Why change his identity? And why did he never return? The investigators knew they needed answers. But before they could contact him, another discovery changed everything. Inside Samuel Carter's journal was one final entry, written only days before his death. A warning, a message that appeared to be directed toward Evelyn decades later. It said, "The truth is not hidden because nobody found it. The truth is hidden because someone wanted it buried." The investigators read the sentence again and again because now they understood something. Evelyn Carter had not disappeared because she accidentally found an old mystery. She disappeared because she was following a trail that someone had spent decades trying to erase. And that trail was leading directly back to the people who control Black Hollow. The forgotten file had opened. The hidden journal had been discovered. The old secrets were returning, but the most important question remained unanswered. What happened to Evelyn Carter on the night she vanished? And was the person responsible still watching from the shadows? The question followed every investigator back from Old Hollow Cemetery. Was someone still watching? For 30 years, Black Hollow had lived with the belief that Evelyn Carter's disappearance was a tragedy frozen in the past, a mystery with no ending, a story that had faded into history. But the hidden journal changed that belief completely, because the investigators now knew something they had never known before. Evelyn had not vanished without a reason. She had been searching. She had been getting closer, and someone had known it. The renewed investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The discovery of Samuel Carter's journal created a chain reaction. Every page opened another door. Every name led to another connection. Every forgotten detail became a possible piece of the truth. The first person investigators focused on was Thomas Vale. For decades, his name had existed quietly in the background. A businessman, a property owner, a respected figure in Black Hollow. But the hidden evidence changed that. Now, he was a central part of the investigation. Detectives located his current residence outside the state. A quiet neighborhood, a normal house, a place where nobody would expect to find a man connected to one of the town's oldest mysteries. When investigators arrived, they expected resistance. They expected denial. They expected someone who had spent years protecting a secret. But what they found surprised them. Thomas Vale was older, tired, a man who looked like he'd been carrying a heavy burden for decades. When investigators mentioned Evelyn Carter's name, his expression changed immediately. Not anger, not confusion, recognition, a reaction that told them something important. He remembered. The interview lasted several hours. At first, Thomas denied knowing anything significant. He claimed Evelyn was only researching old town history. He claimed he had no reason to believe she was in danger. But investigators had something he did not expect. The recording, the photograph, the journal, pieces of a story that connected him to events he could no longer ignore. Slowly, his answers began changing. Not because he admitted everything, but because he realized the past was finally catching up with him. Thomas explained that Hollow Creek Estate had always been controversial. Decades earlier, the property was involved in a dispute that divided the town. There were disagreements over ownership, missing documents, private meetings, decisions made behind closed doors. But he insisted that Evelyn misunderstood what she found. He claimed she was looking at fragments of a much larger story, a story without context. Investigators asked the most important question. What was Evelyn about to uncover? Thomas remained silent. For several moments, he said nothing. Then he gave an answer that changed the investigation. He said, Evelyn found something that was never supposed to be found. The room became quiet, because that sentence confirmed their biggest suspicion. Evelyn's disappearance was connected to her investigation. But Thomas still refused to explain what that discovery was. He claimed fear. He claimed he had spent 30 years trying to forget. He claimed that some truths were more dangerous than people realized. The investigators left the interview with more questions and answers, but they had something they did not have before. Confirmation. Someone knew what happened. The next step was returning to the evidence Evelyn left behind. Her personal notebooks were reviewed again, this time with a different understanding. Investigators noticed references they had previously ignored. Names, locations, dates. One repeated phrase appeared several times. The second archive. Nobody understood what it meant. There was no official location called the second archive, but when investigators looked deeper into Black Hollow's history, they discovered something hidden. Before the town archive existed, important records were stored inside an underground storage facility beneath an old municipal building, a place that had been closed in the late 1980s, a place almost nobody remembered. The investigators searched property records. They discovered that the old building had once been connected to Hollow Creek Estate. Another connection, another piece. The mystery continued expanding. The abandoned municipal building became the next search location. Inside, the investigators found years of decay, broken shelves, water damage, collapsed rooms. But beneath the destruction, they discovered something remarkable, a hidden room, a room that did not appear on any official building plans. Inside were boxes of records, thousands of pages, documents that had never been made public, and among them, Evelyn Carter's name appeared, not once, but dozens of times. The discovery shocked everyone, because it proved Evelyn had been closer to the truth than anyone understood. She had found the hidden archive. She had discovered the missing records. But the investigators also found something else, a final document, a page dated 3 days before Evelyn disappeared. It contained a handwritten message, short, simple, terrifying. It said, "I know who's been following me." The investigators froze, because until that moment, they believed Evelyn had been investigating a secret. Now they realized something worse. The secret had been investigating her. Someone knew what she was doing. Someone knew what she had found. Someone was watching her every move. The question became urgent. Who was following Evelyn? The investigators searched through every person connected to her final days. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, people mentioned in the old reports. And one name appeared again, a name nobody expected, a person who had never been considered a suspect, someone who had helped with the original search, someone who had been trusted by everyone, the original lead investigator's partner, a former officer named Michael Grant. The discovery created shock inside the department, because Grant had been one of the people closest to the original investigation. He had access to the evidence. He had access to the information. He knew exactly what police were looking for. And now investigators had to ask a question nobody wanted to ask. Had the person searching for Evelyn also been connected to why she disappeared? The old case had changed completely. The forgotten file was no longer just revealing a hidden truth. It was revealing a hidden betrayal. And as investigators reopened the records from 1994, they discovered something impossible to ignore. The original investigation had not simply missed clues. Some clues had been removed. Some information had disappeared. And someone had worked very hard to make sure Evelyn Carter's story remained unfinished. But now, after 30 years, the unfinished story was finally being rewritten. The Forgotten File, a fictional cold case. Part 6. The discovery of Michael Grant's name changed the entire investigation. For 3 decades, his name had represented trust, experience, authority. He was not a stranger who appeared in the story. He was part of the story from the beginning. In 1994, when Evelyn Carter disappeared, Michael Grant was one of the first officers assigned to assist with the investigation. He walked through the same streets. He interviewed the same witnesses. He reviewed the same evidence. He stood beside Detective Daniel Reeves during the first desperate days of the search. He was considered reliable, a man who wanted answers, a man who wanted Evelyn found. But now, 30 years later, investigators were looking at the case through a completely different lens, because hidden inside the forgotten archive was something impossible to ignore. Missing evidence, altered reports, details that should have been preserved but somehow disappeared. The investigators did not want to believe what the evidence suggested, because accusing someone connected to an investigation is never simple, especially someone who spent years wearing a badge, especially someone who had earned the trust of an entire department. But facts did not care about reputation. Evidence did not care about history. And the Forgotten File was beginning to tell a story that nobody expected. Detective Daniel Reeves struggled with the discovery. For years, he had believed he and Grant were searching for the same thing. The truth. They had worked together. They had shared information. They had followed leads side by side. Now Reeves had to question memories he thought were certain. He returned to the original investigation notes, page after page, report after report, looking for anything he missed, anything that could explain how the case remained unsolved for so long. Then he found something, a small inconsistency, a detail that seemed meaningless in 1994, but now it stood out. On the night Evelyn disappeared, several witnesses reported seeing a vehicle near the abandoned road where a car was found. The description was recorded. The information was collected. But the follow-up investigation never happened. The report simply ended. No additional interviews. No vehicle search. No explanation. And the person who signed off on closing that lead was Michael Grant. The discovery created a new wave of questions. Why was the lead ignored? Why was the information never pursued? And what did Grant know that investigators never discovered? The team searched for Grant. But unlike Thomas Vale, who had left behind a trail of records, Grant had almost disappeared. He had retired years earlier. He moved frequently. He avoided public attention. The investigators eventually found an address connected to him. But when they arrived, the house was empty. Only one thing remained. A box, left behind in an old storage unit. Inside were personal items, old photographs, documents, and a notebook. The investigators opened it carefully. At first, the notebook appeared ordinary. Personal thoughts, daily reminders, random notes. But after several pages, the tone changed. The writing became darker, more urgent. Grant had been keeping records, not official police records, personal ones. He wrote about Evelyn. He wrote about the investigation. He wrote about the secrets inside Black Hollow. The investigators read every page. And slowly, a disturbing picture appeared. Grant had known about the hidden archive. He had known Evelyn was searching for it. But he also seemed afraid, not of Evelyn, of someone else. Someone with power. Someone who had influence over the town. The notebook contained several references to one phrase, the agreement. Nobody knew what it meant, but it appeared repeatedly. The investigators began searching old town records again. They discovered references to an unofficial agreement made decades earlier between several powerful residents. An agreement connected to Hollow Creek Estate. An agreement that involved money, property, and a decision that changed the future of Black Hollow. But the records were incomplete. Important pages were missing. Names were removed. Dates had been altered. Someone had tried to erase the history. And Evelyn Carter had discovered the remains of that erased story. The investigators now understood the danger she faced. She was not simply uncovering an old secret. She was uncovering a secret that people had spent decades protecting. The question became more urgent. Did Michael Grant help hide the truth? Or was he another person trapped inside it? The answer came from a place nobody expected. A recording hidden inside Grant's storage box. A conversation recorded years earlier. The audio quality was poor. The voices were difficult to identify. But one sentence was clear. A voice said, "She knows too much." Investigators replayed the recording again and again, because those 4 words changed everything. Someone had been discussing Evelyn before she disappeared. Someone knew what she had discovered. Someone considered her a threat. The investigation expanded immediately. Every person connected to Hollow Creek Estate was reviewed. Every name in Samuel Carter's journal was examined. Every relationship was mapped. And slowly, the investigators discovered something shocking. The mystery was not built around one person. It was built around a network, a group of people who had protected the same secret for decades. But one person stood at the center. The same name that appeared in the old photograph. The same name connected to property. The same name Evelyn had been investigating. Thomas Vale. The investigators returned to their interview with him. This time, they brought new evidence. The hidden archive. The missing reports. The recording. Thomas listened quietly. Then he said something that changed the direction of the case. He admitted Evelyn had found the truth, but he claimed he was not the person who silenced her. He said someone else was responsible. Someone nobody had suspected. Someone who had been close enough to control the investigation from the inside. The investigators asked one final question. Who? Thomas looked at them, and after 30 years of silence, he finally spoke the name. A name that would reopen every part of the original investigation. A name that would force Black Hollow to confront the truth it had buried for decades. Because the person responsible was not hiding outside the town. They had been there all along, watching, waiting, and helping everyone believe the mystery would never be solved. The forgotten file a fictional cold case. Part 7. The name spoken inside that interview room changed everything. For 30 years, Black Hollow had searched for someone who existed outside the community. A stranger, a hidden enemy, someone who came into town, caused a tragedy, and disappeared. But the truth revealed something far more disturbing. The person connected to Evelyn Carter's disappearance had never truly left. They had been part of the town, part of the investigation, part of the story from the beginning. The investigators left Thomas Vale's interview, knowing they had crossed a line they could never uncross. The case was no longer a mystery built on missing information. It was a mystery built on information that had been deliberately hidden. Every old report had to be questioned. Every interview had to be reviewed. Every conclusion from 1994 had to be examined again. Because if someone inside the original investigation had manipulated the case, then the entire history of Evelyn Carter's disappearance had been shaped by a false story. Detective Daniel Reeves returned to the police archives alone. The building was almost empty. The halls were quiet. The same place where he had spent countless hours 30 years earlier now felt unfamiliar. He walked past old offices, old photographs, old records, and eventually he reached the storage room where the original case materials were kept. The box containing Evelyn's file was still there, a simple cardboard box, a faded label, a mystery that had survived longer than anyone expected. Reeves opened it again, but this time he was not searching for clues. He was searching for what had been removed. The investigators began comparing the original file with recovered documents from the hidden archive. The differences were impossible to ignore. Several witness statements were incomplete. Certain interviews had missing pages. Some evidence references appeared in old notes, but not in official records. The deeper they looked, the clearer the pattern became. The investigation had not simply gone cold. It had been weakened. Someone had carefully damaged the path leading to the truth. And now, decades later, the investigators were rebuilding that path. The next major discovery came from an interview transcript. A witness named Clara Whitmore had spoken to police 3 days after Evelyn disappeared. Her statement was considered unreliable in 1994. She was older. Her memory was questioned. Her information seemed unclear. But when investigators reviewed the transcript again, they noticed something. A section was missing. The original document ended abruptly. The final page was gone. The recovered archive contained a copy, and on that missing page was a detail that changed the case. Clara had reported seeing Evelyn arguing with someone outside the archive the night before she vanished. Not a stranger, not an unknown person. Someone she recognized, someone from Black Hollow, someone connected to the town's most respected families. The name written in the statement shocked investigators. Michael Grant, the officer who had helped lead the original search, the man who had reviewed evidence, the man who had controlled information, the same person whose name kept appearing everywhere. The discovery forced the investigation into a difficult position because suspicion was no longer based on coincidence. It was based on a pattern. Grant had access. Grant had knowledge. Grant had opportunity. But investigators still needed proof. A suspicion was not enough. A theory was not enough. After 30 years, they needed facts. The search for Grant intensified. They traced his movements after retirement. They contacted former colleagues. They examined financial records. They searched every location connected to him. And eventually, they found another hidden piece of the puzzle. A second storage unit. Unlike the first one, this one was not abandoned. It was carefully maintained. Inside was a collection of files. Not police files. Private files. Files about Black Hollow residents. Files about the Hollow Creek estate dispute. Files about Evelyn Carter. Grant had been watching the investigation, not only after Evelyn disappeared. Before, the investigators found notes describing Evelyn's research, her movements, the people she contacted, the questions she asked. It proved something terrifying. Evelyn was not only investigating a secret. Someone was investigating her. The case had become a battle between discovery and concealment, between someone trying to reveal the truth and someone trying to bury it forever. But the most shocking discovery inside Grant's files was a letter. A letter dated one day after Evelyn disappeared. The recipient was unknown. The handwriting belonged to Grant. The message was short, only a few sentences. But the meaning was devastating. It suggested that Grant knew Evelyn was gone. Before anyone officially reported her missing, before the search began, before the investigation started, the investigators stared at the document in silence, because that single letter changed the timeline. If Grant knew Evelyn had disappeared before the official report, how? The investigation now had a new focus. Not just what happened to Evelyn, but what happened during the hours before anyone knew she was missing. Those hours became the most important part of the entire case. The investigators reconstructed Evelyn's final night. They followed every known movement, every phone call, every location, and then they discovered something strange. A final phone call had been made from Evelyn's apartment, a call never mentioned in the original investigation, a call placed shortly before she left. The number belonged to a private line, a number that had been disconnected years earlier, a number registered to an organization connected to Hollow Creek Estate. The investigators realized the mystery was much larger than they imagined. Evelyn had not simply discovered an old secret. She had discovered a secret that was still active. Someone had been protecting it. Someone had been monitoring her. Someone had been willing to manipulate an entire investigation to keep the truth buried. But now the past was opening. The hidden files, the missing reports, the recovered recordings. Everything was pointing toward one conclusion. The original investigation had been compromised from the beginning, and as detectives continued searching through forgotten evidence, they uncovered one final piece. A photograph taken on the night Evelyn disappeared. A photograph that had never been released. A photograph showing Evelyn standing beside someone just moments before she vanished, and the person standing next to her was someone nobody expected. Someone who had spent 30 years claiming they wanted to find her. The truth inside Black Hollow was finally coming out. But the closer investigators moved toward the answer, the more dangerous the truth became. The Forgotten File, a fictional cold case. Part 8. The photograph changed the investigation forever. For 30 years, the final moment of Evelyn Carter's life existed only as a collection of questions. A missing timeline. A series of incomplete memories. A story with the most important pages removed. But now, hidden inside the forgotten files, investigators had something they never had before. A moment captured in time. A moment that showed Evelyn before she disappeared. And standing beside her was the person nobody expected. Michael Grant, the man who helped search for her. The man who helped lead the investigation. The man whose name had appeared again and again as the hidden evidence continued to surface. The investigators examined the photograph carefully. They did not rush. They did not assume. They knew that one image could change a case, but it could also create mistakes if interpreted incorrectly. A photograph could reveal the truth, but it could also create new questions. The image showed Evelyn outside the old municipal archive building, the same location where investigators later discovered the hidden records. She was holding a folder. Grant was standing several feet away. Their body language was difficult to read. Were they arguing? Were they discussing something important? Or was it simply a conversation between two people who knew each other? The photograph alone could not answer that, but the timing was impossible to ignore. The picture was taken less than an hour before Evelyn vanished. The investigators immediately returned to Grant's files. They searched for any reference to that night, and they found something unexpected. Grant had written a private note, a note that described a meeting. According to his own writing, Evelyn had contacted him because she believed she had discovered something connected to the old Hollow Creek records. Grant claimed he agreed to meet her because he wanted to help, but he never mentioned the meeting during the original investigation. That omission became one of the biggest questions in the case. Why hide something so important? Why allow investigators to spend 30 years searching without this information? Grant's explanation was simple. He claimed he was afraid. He claimed he believed exposing the truth would put more people in danger. But investigators needed more than explanations. They needed evidence. They needed to know what happened after that meeting. The final hour before Evelyn disappeared. The hour that had remained hidden for 3 decades. The investigators returned to the old archive building. They searched the surrounding area. They examined old security records. They interviewed anyone who might remember seeing something that night. Most memories had faded, but one person remembered, an elderly man named Walter Hayes. In 1994, he lived near the archive. He rarely spoke about the case, but when investigators showed him the photograph, his expression changed. He recognized the scene. He remembered seeing Evelyn and Grant outside the building, but he remembered something else. A third person, someone standing near the entrance, someone who left shortly after the conversation ended. The investigators asked who it was. Walter hesitated. Then he gave them a name. Thomas Vale. The 3 names that had appeared throughout the investigation were now connected. Evelyn, Grant, Vali. 3 people, 1 night, 1 secret. The investigators realized the disappearance was not the result of one isolated event. It was a result of a chain of decisions made by people who knew more than they admitted. The question became, who was protecting whom? The investigation returned to Thomas Vale. This time, investigators approached him differently. They no longer asked what he knew. They asked what he was afraid of. The change in questioning produced a reaction. For the first time, Thomas admitted something. He said Black Hollow had always protected its reputation. The town had survived because people agreed to forget certain things, certain events, certain names. He described a group of influential residents who had controlled decisions for decades, not officially, not publicly, but quietly, a group that believed they had the right to decide what the town remembered and what it forgot. According to Thomas, Evelyn discovered records that exposed this group, records showing how Hollow Creek Estate had been used to hide something decades earlier. But Thomas refused to explain exactly what. He said he was not responsible for Evelyn's disappearance. He said he tried to warn her, but the investigators noticed something. Every person connected to the mystery claimed the same thing. They were not responsible. They were only afraid. But fear alone did not explain 30 years of silence. Someone had made choices. Someone had removed evidence. Someone had allowed Evelyn Carter's name to become another forgotten story. They discovered more documents connected to the old agreement, and one document stood apart. A handwritten list, names, dates, payments. The list appeared to show that several town officials had benefited from decisions surrounding Hollow Creek Estate. But at the bottom of the page was a name that shocked everyone. Daniel Reeves, the retired detective who had spent 30 years trying to solve the case. For a moment, the entire investigation stopped, because now the question changed again. Was Reeves also connected? Had he unknowingly been part of something larger? Or had someone deliberately placed his name there to destroy the investigation? The discovery created a new wave of uncertainty. The investigators knew they could trust no assumption. Not about Grant, not about Vale, not even about the original detective who had carried the case for decades. They reviewed Reeves's actions from 1994. Every decision, every report, every piece of evidence he handled. And slowly, they discovered something unexpected. Reeves had not hidden information. He had been searching for the missing information. The document containing his name was not a list of participants. It was a list of people being monitored, people who had become threats to the secret, and Reeves was one of them. The realization changed everything. The investigation was no longer about discovering who knew the truth. It was about discovering who controlled the silence. Because Evelyn Carter was not the only person who had been searching. She was not the only person who had been warned. She was not the only person who had gotten too close. The forgotten file revealed that the mystery of Black Hollow had claimed another victim long before Evelyn disappeared. And now investigators were beginning to understand the terrifying possibility. Evelyn's disappearance was not the beginning of the secret. It was the moment the secret began fighting back. The Forgotten File, a fictional cold case. Part 9. The secret had started fighting back. That realization changed the way investigators viewed the entire case. For years, they searched for the moment Evelyn Carter disappeared. They searched for the person who took her. They searched for the event that ended her story. But now they understood something far more complicated. Evelyn's disappearance was not the beginning. It was a result of something that had been building for decades. A hidden conflict, a buried history, a battle between those who wanted the truth revealed and those who wanted it erased. The investigation returned to the recovered documents from the underground archive. The pages were old. The ink was faded. Some sections were damaged beyond repair. But the information that remained was enough to reveal a disturbing pattern. The Hollow Creek Agreement was not just about property. It was about control. Years earlier, several powerful people in Black Hollow had made decisions that affected the future of the entire town. They controlled land. They controlled information. They controlled which stories were remembered and which disappeared. For years, nobody questioned it, because the people involved were respected. They were leaders, business owners, officials, people who appeared trustworthy. But beneath that image was something much darker, a system built on silence. Evelyn Carter discovered that system, and once she understood it, she could not ignore it. That was what made her different. She was not searching for attention. She was not trying to expose people for personal gain. She was searching because she believed the truth belonged to everyone. That belief was what placed her in danger. The investigators studied Evelyn's final weeks again. This time, they noticed something they had missed before. She had stopped contacting certain people. She had changed her routine. She had begun keeping copies of everything she found. She knew something was wrong. She knew someone was watching, but she continued anyway, because she believed she was close. Very close. The recovered notes showed that Evelyn had identified a missing piece, a document that connected the past with the present, a document that could explain why so many people protected the same secret. But that document was still missing. The investigators believed it was the final piece of the puzzle, the one thing that could reveal exactly what happened on the night Evelyn vanished. The search for that document became the center of the investigation. Teams returned to every location connected to Evelyn: her apartment, the archive, Hollow Creek Estate, the old cemetery, every place where she had searched. And finally, they found something inside a location nobody expected: Evelyn's old apartment. For 30 years, everyone believed it had already been thoroughly searched. But investigators now knew the original investigation had been compromised. So they searched again. Behind a damaged section of wall, they discovered a hidden compartment. Inside was a small collection of items: a notebook, a photograph, and a recording. The notebook belonged to Evelyn. Unlike her previous notes, this one contained personal thoughts, fear, doubt, questions. She wrote about feeling watched. She wrote about people changing their behavior around her. She wrote about discovering that some members of the town knew more than they admitted. But the final pages were the most important. They described her meeting with Michael Grant, and they revealed something investigators did not expect. Evelyn trusted him. She believed he was trying to help. That discovery complicated everything. Because if Grant was not her enemy, what role did he really play? The recording answered part of that question. The audio was damaged, but Evelyn's voice could be heard. She was speaking quietly. She sounded tired, but determined. She said she had discovered the truth about Hollow Creek. She said she knew why people were protecting the secret. And then she said something that stopped investigators completely. She said, "I know who started this. Not who continued it. Not who protected it. Who started it." That sentence changed the investigation, because it suggested the secret was older than anyone realized. Older than Evelyn. Older than Grant. Older than the people currently involved. The investigators began looking further back, into Black Hollow's earliest records. They discovered that Hollow Creek Estate had been controversial since the 1950s, decades before Evelyn was born, decades before anyone connected to the current investigation became involved. The mystery was becoming larger, but the investigators also discovered something important. The original secret was not a crime. It was a decision that created consequences, a decision that caused people to lie, a decision that eventually led Evelyn into danger. The investigators followed the trail back to one family, the Vale family. Thomas Vale's relatives had been connected to Hollow Creek for generations. The old record suggested that the family knew the full history, and they had spent decades controlling what information became public. When investigators confronted Thomas with the new evidence, his reaction was different. He looked exhausted, not surprised, as if he had expected this moment to come. He admitted that his family had protected the secret, but he insisted Evelyn's disappearance was not their decision. He claimed someone else had taken control. Someone who believed protecting the town mattered more than protecting the truth. Someone who believed Evelyn had crossed a line. The investigators asked who. Thomas refused to answer. He only said one thing: "You have been looking at the wrong person." The statement created a new mystery, because everyone believed the investigation was centered around Thomas Vale and Michael Grant. But Thomas suggested they were only pieces, not the center. The investigators returned to the evidence room. They placed every name, every document, every clue on the board, and then they noticed something, a pattern. The same names appeared again and again, but one name was missing, a person who had been involved since the beginning, a person who had helped organize the original search, a person who had guided investigators away from certain leads, a person nobody had questioned because nobody thought they needed to. The original investigation coordinator, a man named Richard Holloway. For 30 years, his name had never appeared as a suspect because he was the person everyone trusted, the person who helped the town move forward, the person who claimed to want answers. But now, investigators discovered something hidden in the old records. Richard Holloway had known about the underground archive before anyone else. He had access, he had connections, and on the night Evelyn disappeared, he was the last person to sign into the municipal building. The forgotten file had revealed another secret. The person who controlled the investigation may have been the person who controlled the truth. And after 30 years, the search for Evelyn Carter had finally reached a person who was there from the very beginning. Richard Holloway had spent 30 years standing on the other side of the investigation, not as a suspect, not as a person of interest, but as someone people trusted. He was the man who organized meetings, the man who helped coordinate searches, the man who spoke publicly when the town needed reassurance. For years, Black Hollow remembered him as one of the people who tried to bring Evelyn Carter home. But the forgotten evidence told a different story, a story hidden beneath decades of carefully protected silence. The investigators began rebuilding Richard Holloway's timeline from the beginning, every movement, every conversation, every decision. And the deeper they looked, the more unusual the pattern became. Holloway was always nearby, not close enough to attract suspicion, not distant enough to be uninvolved. He appeared at every critical moment, when evidence was collected, when witnesses were interviewed, when certain leads suddenly disappeared. He was always there, watching, guiding, controlling the direction of the investigation. But suspicion was not enough. The investigators needed proof. They needed to know exactly what Richard Holloway knew and what he had done with that knowledge. The search moved toward the final remaining pieces of evidence: the hidden archive, the recovered recordings, the missing documents, the old police reports. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. Someone inside the system had shaped the investigation from the beginning. Someone had decided which questions would be asked and which questions would never be asked. The investigators discovered that Holloway had maintained a private collection of documents for decades. Unlike Grant's files, which appeared to record fear and uncertainty, Holloway's records were organized, careful, controlled, almost like someone preparing for the possibility that the past might return. Inside those files were copies of documents that officially did not exist, private conversations, meeting notes, property records, and one final document that made investigators stop: a letter from Evelyn Carter. But it was not a letter she sent. It was a letter she wrote and never delivered. The investigators read it slowly, because inside those words was the clearest picture of Evelyn's final thoughts. She knew she was close. She knew someone was trying to stop her, but she also knew something else. She knew Michael Grant was not the person she feared most. She knew Thomas Vale was hiding information, but she believed the person controlling everything was someone else. Someone who had access to every piece of the investigation. Someone who could make evidence disappear without anyone noticing. Someone who could convince an entire town that nothing unusual had happened. The letter ended with one sentence. A sentence that revealed Evelyn understood the danger she was facing. The person looking for me already knows where I am. The investigators sat in silence, because the meaning was clear. Evelyn was not running from someone unknown. She was running from someone close. Someone she had trusted. The discovery forced Detective Reeves to confront the hardest truth of all. The case he had carried for 30 years was never just about finding a missing woman. It was about understanding how many people allowed the truth to disappear. The investigators brought Richard Holloway in for questioning. He arrived calmly. No panic, no anger, just a quiet confidence. The same confidence he had shown decades earlier. When they placed the evidence in front of him, he looked at every document carefully. Then he smiled, not because he was happy, because he knew this moment would eventually come. The investigators asked him about the hidden archive. He admitted knowing about it. They asked him about Hollow Creek Estate. He admitted knowing the history. They asked him about Evelyn. He became silent. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The investigators asked one question. What happened that night? Richard Holloway looked down, and after 30 years of silence, he finally began telling the story. But his version was not what anyone expected. He claimed Evelyn discovered something that could destroy powerful people. He claimed she found proof of decisions made decades earlier. He claimed the town leaders were terrified of what would happen if the information became public. But he insisted he did not want Evelyn harmed. He said he wanted to convince her to stop, to wait, to understand the consequences. The investigators listened carefully, because one thing was obvious. Richard Holloway was admitting involvement, but he was still hiding something. The question remained. What happened after Evelyn left the archive? The investigators returned to the final missing hours. They discovered a new witness. Someone who had never spoken before. Someone who had kept silent because they were afraid. A former employee at Hollow Creek Estate. The witness remembered seeing a vehicle parked near the property on the night Evelyn disappeared. A vehicle belonging to Richard Holloway. The witness also remembered something else. A sound. A confrontation. A woman's voice. Evelyn's voice. The investigation moved quickly. Forensic teams returned to Hollow Creek Estate, the location that had been connected to the mystery from the beginning, the location where Evelyn believed the truth was buried. And beneath the